Right, speaker, the live stream is go. I'd say we
Hi.
are ready.
All right, well, we'll get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Egolf. I am the Speaker of the House in the New Mexico Legislature, and I want to welcome you to our second virtual stop on our New Mexico jobs listening tour. We started these meetings in late December of 2016, shortly after the 2016 election, when Democrats regained the majority in the state house, but before we were sworn into office. And they were initially started to get members of the House out from the central Rio Grande corridor out into parts of the state that we don't often get to visit. And so we started in southeast New Mexico, in Hobbs and Jal. We were in a snowstorm in Jal, New Mexico, which is right on the border with Texas, in a snowstorm at 2 degrees above zero in December. And since then, we have gone all over the state, including Farmington, and Gallup, and many, many places in between. We had said that we were going to make another visit to every county in New Mexico before the end of this year, and then COVID-19 happened, and those plans went out the window. So we are now having the same type visit, just by virtual means. We want to go around the state and ask local elected officials, business owners, economic development professionals about what the legislature can do to help improve the business climate in communities throughout New Mexico, what the legislature can do to help innovative businesses thrive and grow in our state, and what we can do to help local government do better with their work in support of economic development and diversification. Today, we are in Los Alamos County, and I think everyone on this call but me is actually in Los Alamos County. And we've got a great group of folks that are going to be with us having a conversation of the type I just described. First, I'll introduce, we are joined by Christine Chandler, the state representative for House District 43, which is all of Los Alamos County, some very special parts of Santa Fe County, and then also some of Rio Arriba. Is there a fourth one in there?
Sandoval.
Sandoval, yeah.
Sandoval County, yeah.
Yes. So she is the successor to Stephanie Garcia Richard, and Christine has hit the ground running and is really doing a fantastic job in the State House of Representatives. Has taken on some big pieces of legislation, and has firmly established herself as a leading authority on many issues in the House, and the people of Los Alamos are very lucky to have her representing them. She is dogged in her defense of your community. Just know, anytime she smells a whiff of something that's not going to be good for Los Alamos, fire and brimstone come raining down on my head, and I have to tell her that, everything is just fine. Representative Chandler, would you like to say a few words before I introduce our other guests?
Yes, Speaker, thank you very much. And thank you for joining us virtually. I'm sorry we're in a position where you can't be here live, but we're working within the parameters that we have. And I think you, all the folks on the call here recognize that fire and brimstone approach to governance that I exercise. Dr. Beyerschmidt has certainly seen it in various conversations with me. So welcome. I think these kinds of interactions with business leaders and community leaders is very important for us as we attempt to craft and work on crafting legislation that supports business, and particularly business in the COVID environment. We're going to have a lot on our plate next session, and hearing from this group of individuals and others across the state are going to help us make informed, intelligent, helpful decisions to the business community. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Speaker.
Great, thank you. I'll let folks know the whole group that we have, and then we're going to go through a few at a time to hear from all of our esteemed guests. We have with us county counselor, and before people put in the comments, it is a county counselor in Los Alamos. That's how they do it up in Los Alamos. So county counselor and vice chair of the council, it is Randy Righty. We have the superintendent of the Los Alamos Public Schools, Dr. Kurt Steinhaus. We have the executive director of the Los Alamos Commerce and Development Corporation, Patrick Sullivan. The director of the Los Alamos Chamber of Commerce, Ren Herman. We have the HR manager at Del Norte Credit Union, Matthew Waldschmidt. Deputy director of operations at Lannel, Dr. Kelly Bierschmidt. And Michelle Henry, an old friend of mine, corporate, a young person who is an old friend, a longtime friend of mine, I should say, right? Michelle Henry, corporate counsel for Pebble Labs, and co-founder and lead scientist at Pebble Labs, Dr. Richard Sayer. So we've got a great conversation ahead. I think with schools beginning to open around the state, Santa Fe starts tomorrow. Other districts have opened up. Return to school is top of mind for many people around the state. Dr. Steinhaus, I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about what your school district is doing in preparation for the fall semester, and what's happening on the ground up in Los Alamos with its schools.
Sure, Mr. Speaker, I'll be happy to share that. It's an honor to be on with you and Representative Chandler. Thank you for including all of us. It's a great opportunity. Let's see, trying to figure out a way to be concise. A massive amount of work has been accomplished in the last 3 months, beginning with professional development for every single one of our teachers and our principals to learn a completely different way to run education. And that has included courses during June and July, and we call that by teachers for teachers. So we paid our teachers, who have an incredible amount of expertise, to teach each other. And we did bring in some outside experts, but most of it was inside baseball work. We started school last Thursday, 100% online, and it was incredibly smooth. Every single kid has their own machine. And was it perfect? No, not even close. Did we have lots of bugs to work out? We still do. Are we making adjustments? We are. But the way and the speed of innovation in education right now is something I've never seen in my lifetime. And it's been incredible to watch. It's been kind of like a legislative session. My experience in legislative session is the highs are higher and the lows are lower. And you get a piece of legislation moving and you get a good committee vote and it's out of the committee, and you go to the next committee and oh my gosh, it went down in flames. So one day you're cheering and the other day you're in tears. And it is very emotional. I will share with you that last night I sent a survey out to all of our parents and all of our staff. And the first question was, this was about a school board meeting that's coming up a week from Thursday. And it said, if the governor approves, would you prefer to be 100% remote like we are now? Would you prefer to go to hybrid mode? And hybrid mode would mean that half the kids come on Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday is used for deep cleaning and one-on-one small group conversations and professional development. And Thursday and Friday is the other half of kids. That's hybrid. And the third choice parents were given was 5 days a week, if allowed by the governor. And it's surprising to me that 80% of our parents want our kids back at school, either in hybrid mode or 5 days a week. 5 days a week, 38% of our parents want that. 39% want the hybrid mode. And then at the same time, I modified the questions a little bit and interviewed our staff, because you've probably heard in the news, we've got teachers all over the country who are really worried about just coming to school. And I was pleasantly surprised that over 60% of our teachers and professional staff would like kids to be back at school. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I could talk until it gets dark, and I know you don't want me to do that. So I think I'll just stop there. I thought some good hard data might be a way to contribute to this conversation.
Well, it's very interesting. You know, we're we're having, of course, the same conversation in Santa Fe, and everyone has been paying a lot of attention to some of those stories out of Georgia, where high schools have seen in the first 10 days thousands of students in quarantine and hundreds of cases. And it appears to me that those school districts didn't take quite the sort of thoughtful approach that the public education department has been working through with local school districts. And it is, I think, totally appropriate that the districts are making the decision that's right for their community. And you mentioned legislative session. We did it remotely, and the idea of fixing kinks on the fly and making adjustments. That was only 70 people in the House over 5 days. I can't imagine the scale of issues that the districts are confronting with thousands of students. But one thing that I kept saying during the session as we had technical issues is, please remember, let's be kind to one another and give each other the benefit of the doubt that we're trying our best and that it's the technology. And that worked about 90% of the time to keep everyone sort of rowing in the same direction. Next, we're going to visit with Patrick Sullivan. He is, again, the director of the Los Alamos Commerce
and Development Corporation.
Commerce and Development Corporation.
Yes.
Ren Herman, director of the Chamber of Commerce, and Matthew Waldschmidt from Del Norte Credit Union. I'll put the question to each of you. I'm curious what the business climate is like now in Los Alamos. How are your local businesses adapting to online retail and remote sales? And what are some of the things that you'd like to see coming out of the legislature that would help you in your work with the business community in Los Alamos? Maybe we'll just go back in that order. Mr. Sullivan, if you'd like to take a crack at that first, then we'll go on down.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Chandler for inviting us here today. So our community is a little bit different with the laboratory being here in terms of how we were affected. And I mentioned some of this on a call this morning with Congressman Lujan. If you take a look at just the numbers at our gross receipts tax revenues, because of the laboratory, you will not see a significant decrease in the county's revenues due to gross receipts tax. But that does not tell the real story of how our business community has been affected here. There's been a significant impact on our business community here, both in terms of the restrictions on occupancy limits and who can be open and how they can be open, and the fact that the laboratory, and I think wisely, has sent most of their staff into a work from home status. So you've removed perhaps 2/3 of the laboratory's workforce population from our community that are typically here during the day. So our restaurants, our retail sector are very much struggling right now, just like they are all over the country. I'll let Ren talk in a little bit more detail about some of the conversations she's had, but we have lost a handful of businesses here on a permanent basis. Some of them kind of 100% COVID related. Some of them COVID was kind of the last breaking point in their ability to stay open. And the ones that are still open, I think have done an incredible job, much like the schools had to do in adapting very quickly. Our business sector has too, in terms of altering their business model, altering the way they interact with their customer base, being innovative, putting things online, offering home delivery and curbside pickup. We've had businesses do live stream Facebook events to show the merchandise in their store and to get people in. So they've done, I think, an incredible job and the best job they can. In kind of thinking about what the state do, one of the things that I think is very much worth exploring is looking at legislation that would perhaps allow the governor to enact some changes to the anti-donation clause in a time of crisis. So if you have a natural disaster, a flood, a fire, if you have some type of severe business continuity disruption, like a pandemic, the rules for anti-donation may be relaxed or may be changed. And perhaps that's a declaration by the governor or some other body that allows the municipalities in that area to work more closely with their businesses. Again, I mentioned this to Congressman Lujan today in terms of something like a PPP program at the federal level that is a permanent program that can be rapidly deployed anywhere in the country and get cash in the hands of businesses in the form of a grant very, very quickly. That could be a federal response, but on a state and local response, the anti-donation clause here has made it very difficult for municipalities that perhaps had the ability to help businesses in some capacity, and it's hindered their ability to do that. It could be as easy as, municipalities being concerned, gee, we've got extra 10 by 10 tents. Could we lend these out to restaurants for outdoor dining? And they're being concerned that violates anti-donation. And so that's something that I think could be very beneficial to explore moving forward is there a legislative ability to have changes made to that statute in a time of crisis? That would be the number one thing that I think could happen legislatively, to help communities recover. And maybe I'll let Ren jump in here and talk a little bit more about her conversations with local businesses and what they're looking for in terms of assistance. But thank you very much.
Sure, thank you. And I'll just say, I think that is a really creative and very good idea about the anti-donation clause. We've got some of the Speaker's office staff on the call. So guys, would you please mark that down? It'd be especially good if we could figure a way to do it without having to amend the Constitution.
Correct.
Because there are constitutional exemptions for the anti-donation clause. So we could see if we could fit this within one. We did that, and I'll mention, I'm sure Ren knows, but we created the Small Business Recovery Act in the last session. And we did it with the severance tax permanent fund, and we were able to do that because it allows for investments to be made from the corpus of the fund. So we characterize this as an investment. So I think it's definitely worth looking at in the upcoming session. It would have been beneficial for the Plaza Cafe here in Santa Fe. They had set up tables and umbrellas out right in front of their restaurant, and then there were some city picnic tables, just maybe 10 feet down, and they were having their restaurant guests sit there. And, it was sad. I mean, I was actually there when the person came from the city and said, gosh, we can't let you use those. So they took the picnic tables away from the city, and the restaurant bought ones and put them in. And it just seemed crazy to me, but I understand. But yeah. So next we have Ren Herman from Los Alamos Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, and we'd love to hear from you. The same that we heard from Mr. Sullivan. What can the legislature do to help, and how are things looking up in Los Alamos? Oh, you're muted.
Thank you very much, Speaker Egolf and Representative Chandler. It's an honor to be here today. So, just to follow up what Patrick shared, it's a very challenging time, obviously, for our businesses. And some of the things they're sharing with me, a lot of them are just so overextended at this point that they just don't even want to consider taking on another loan at this point. And I've had a lot of folks say to me, "Oh, there's still funds available through the PPP and these different programs," but these business owners are just saying, "Ren, it's just not possible for us to do this at this time," and they're not sure in many cases if they'll be open in a year to make these payments. So, I certainly understand what they're up against. It's gut wrenching to hear these stories over and over again every day. Another thing that I think is a huge challenge for a lot of these businesses and a lot of the workers just in general right now is childcare. And I think if there's anything that can be done to help with that right now, it would help just about everybody. As Patrick mentioned, we had Congressman Lujan this morning speaking with the chamber members and others this morning. And one of our business people that I had recruited to come on and talk was texting with me on the side during this. And she said she had 3 different classes happening in her restaurant right then in her wine room during the lunch business while she was trying to conduct business. And, her kids were doing their classes in the wine room right then. So, we've got to just try and come up with something to help all of these people when it comes to childcare too.
It is a huge issue. I am the parent in the household. I've been staying home with my daughters. They're 10 and 12, while my wife has been going to work, and she's involved in a new manufacturing startup. So she's actually bringing a manufacturing facility to New Mexico. So she has to actually be there. And, it's hard, even my daughters are 10 and 12 and they still, have tech support, multiple platforms for all the different classes they're taking and multiple devices that aren't compatible with each other. And so it is a real challenge. And I told some of my teacher friends, nothing in the world I could imagine would be better at increasing the respect Americans already have for teachers than turning every parent into a teacher at the flip of a switch. So it's really incredible. But you're right. I would also just point out, definitely with regard to PPP, although that application deadline is passed, but also with the Small Business Recovery Act, there's no collateral requirement and no personal guarantee. So it's an obligation only of the company, and it's an unsecured, non-recourse loan, which is the best that we could do because of the anti-donation. Also at a very, very low interest rate. So hopefully, and we learned yesterday that the $100 million fund that the State Investment Council set aside is fully committed. Not all the money is out the door, but they've lent 25 million, and the next 75 is in process. So that's between those two, that's about $500 million that's available.
And Speaker, did the governor not assign some of the CARES Act money also to an economic grant program? Ren, are you in the loop on that? The governor assigned 50 million, I think the number was, as a grant program for small businesses. I know, so I just wanted to alert you to that. I'm hoping you all are aware of that.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. Next, I'll ask Matthew Waldschmidt from Del Norte Credit Union. How does the world looking from the credit union perspective, and what are you seeing among your business customers in Los Alamos?
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be able to answer questions. From the credit union industry, listening to the 2 previous people giving their feedback, I can agree that being up here in Los Alamos, particularly, that, we have some stability with people who work at the lab, whether they're able to work remotely or at the lab. But you can definitely see, too, the impact of, workers who work in the community and may not be able to work as many hours, or perhaps have been impacted because the business has had to close or shut down. So when we look at that in a credit union, we're servicing people with things like consumer loans and mortgages. And in areas like consumer loans, where people are going to be going out and purchasing vehicles and recreational vehicles, or just taking out personal loans, we're starting to see a lot less types of requests in that area. the positive is that rates are going down in mortgages or have remained relatively low, and that's given people the opportunity to refinance their homes and get access to funds that way. So that's a good thing. I think as far as a business model goes, we've been working diligently to continue to improve and being able to assist people remotely. That can be good and bad. It depends on where we're looking at. Some people have easy access to being able to do things online, whereas other people really need the convenience of being able to walk into the business. So that's kind of a mixed batch. But I agree with what Ren said earlier about childcare. Looking at all the employees that we have, especially ones that have kids in school, they don't have as easy access to being able to put their kids into programs after school or having childcare options. I'm not sure how to approach it from the legislative standpoint, but I think looking for ways that can continue to stimulate job growth or people's income to allow them to continue to maintain. I think those are going to be the critical things to them being able to continue to take care of their financial life.
Yeah, the stability of the lab is it's always a wonderful asset for your community, but especially in times like these, to have the mission there continue and the employment continue is a double benefit. Counselor Randall Ridey, I'm curious how things look from your perspective up in Los Alamos. How does the business community seem to be going? A lot of your constituents, I imagine, are small business owners. I'm also curious if you're seeing much activity upticking in construction. I know here in Santa Fe, on my street, there are 4 houses being remodeled. Almost every street in town seems to have a construction crew of some kind on it. I'm curious if you're seeing the same in Los Alamos.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker Egolf and Representative Chandler, for the invitation to attend the meeting today and provide a little bit of our local government perspective. And yeah, thanks for those questions. I just wanted to, I guess, also one thing that hasn't come up that I would like to highlight is broadband and digital divide. So, and it was kind of alluded to, I think, in the last comments by Mr. Waldschmidt, but that's definitely something we're looking at, and that affects as we're going forward with, I know the schools are working really hard to make sure everyone has access and even setting up digital hotspots, but I think just if we're going to be shifting a little bit with more work from home, which seems like might be one of the outcomes of the pandemic, that's one thing we're looking at locally is, what can we do to have better access to broadband. Yeah, the other thing, just the anti-donation, I think is another big thing. And I like the suggestion. I think there's some other things we can look at for anti-donation too, but it's kind of like we have the rainy day and then we can't spend the money. So if you're lucky enough to have it. So that's been a little bit frustrating on our part. Yeah, I think in terms of we've seen the effects, the local businesses that have unfortunately had to close. And, as Mr. Sullivan noted, some of them, may have been thinking about closing, but this was just kind of the final straw. But it's just a very unfortunate, and I think you've heard childcare. That's the thing that really affects small businesses. You heard the story, the one restaurateur that, is running, a school and a restaurant at the same time. And that's pretty difficult. So I think obviously, and it's probably not a legislative solution in the short term, but being able to have the schools will reopen as safely as possible and have as much instruction is a solution, because there's just no way, I don't think, that we could have enough capacity for the childcare that you could imagine is usually taken care of by people who have their kids at school. There's not enough capacity, so it isn't really a funding matter. In terms of local, the like building and some things like that, that has been continued to be strong. We've had been fortunate, as you mentioned, enough local projects that we've been continuing to do some construction, and there seems like there's still a fair amount of competition for contractors, and so the prices are still pretty high. And so, that's good for that business. It's not so good for us trying to contract the work, but, that's something that we've seen. And yeah, just trying to remember, you had maybe another question that I might have skipped over.
No, I'd asked about your constituents who might be small business owners and if you're seeing an uptick in construction.
Yeah, and I think so obviously the bulk of the tax revenues come from the lab, but in terms of what people think about as the community, a lot of it is actually the local business owners. And so that's another reason why it's doubly hurtful. We've been actively trying to support that community as much as we can. And again, that's kind of the anti-donation issue. And there's some good reasons, I think, why we shouldn't be allowed to just give money away to whoever we want. But on the other hand, there should be some more ability for public-private partnerships. Obviously, there's the LEDA, so we have Hubble Labs here, and they have LEDA arrangements. But those are something that are of a scale that, and they're of a type too that doesn't fit a lot of the businesses. So that's really going to be fitting more of the large efforts and and new recruitment of technology companies fits pretty well with that. But yeah, I think that that kind of thing legislatively could be useful as to how we can use LEDA type things or even simplified, because frankly that some of the business owners don't want to go through the paperwork involved and that kind of process. So that's been something else that has been a concern we've heard. And I guess on the positive, I don't want to end, just have negative things, but just want to say, something that's been good, I think, has been the permits for outdoor dining. I think that was a success story. I think that's a case where the state really helped, because a lot of them are selling alcohol also. But that was a case, I think, where we were able to get those so-called picnic permits set up pretty quickly for restaurants that could do business outside. And that's really a win-win, obviously, because it's a safer way for people to feel like they can dine, and it's a way for the businesses to get some revenue. And so really appreciative of that process that was allowed. And so I think that was I think that's kind of the main thing on that. And then naturally, with having some, obviously a lot of people work at the lab, but people don't work at the lab. So have some concerns about, just being able to afford rents, mortgages, concerned about evictions that might be coming up, and obviously access to healthcare. It's the worst thing we can do is have people not have access to healthcare during a pandemic or any time really, but this time is particularly tough. And as you said, we're lucky to have a lot of people covered, but that's actually one of the things that came up actually was difficulty getting insurance coverage for some fraction of people who live in Los Alamos County. And so I think that was kind of one of the surprising findings. We had a health gaps analysis report recently presented to us, and that was one of the findings. So just wanted to highlight that too.
Representative, I'm curious, we're hearing a couple of ideas for legislation. I'm wondering if anything is piquing your interest for something you might do in the upcoming session.
Well, I'm not sure if this is directly on point as to the counselor, but with regard to Ren's comments, I'm wondering if for takeout restaurants and so on, whether or not adding alcohol to the takeout process might help support those businesses. Have you gotten any feedback on that, Ren? You're muted. Yeah.
Yes, that would be a huge help for some restaurants. That would be a huge help. I know there are a lot of different rules that go along with that. We've been keeping an eye on that and hoping that that would come through, because that would definitely help a few specific restaurants.
Okay. Yeah. And I know, Speaker, you've been active and interested in legislation that might help support those sorts of measures. And
we've worked on it a couple times, and
yes,
whether it's food delivery services to be able to get, you call up, we have a food delivery service in Santa Fe to be able to call up Tomasitas and have them bring you your family some enchiladas and a margarita for mom and dad. But we can't do that right now. So we've tried, we've gotten close. repeatedly, and we'll keep trying. But we've gotten the same feedback certainly. I feel like my district in the House is like the restaurant district, because all of the fancy restaurants in Santa Fe and a lot of ones that aren't that fancy are all in the district I represent. So I get a lot of feedback on restaurant issues.
Well, we'll keep you posted on that, Ren, so because we can always use a little help when some of these bills come up in terms of, that support businesses for sure.
Let me know. We're there.
Yeah.
Although when it comes to restaurants, I am a little jealous of Representative Chandler because I don't have El Parasol in the district I represent. So
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And when the speaker's in town, occasionally he'll ask me to lunch over there. So that's where you can find him if he's up here.
I'm a lawyer when I'm not legislator, and there are two communities where I always refuse telephonic hearings if it's an option. And one is Los Alamos because of El Parasol, and the other is Las Vegas because of the spick and span. So I always make a point of making the drive so I can grab some meat there. Next, I'd like to invite Kelly Bierschmidt, the Deputy Director for Operations at Los Alamos National Laboratories. And I think we don't have Richard Sayre, but we have Michelle Henry from Pebble Labs. If you could talk a little bit about the importance of the labs, especially during COVID times. Pebble Labs, Michelle, I think folks would love to hear what Pebble Labs is, and what its work entails. But Dr. Bierschmidt, I'd love to hear from you an update on how the lab is handling COVID, and I know also the lab has been very helpful with modeling of transmission of the virus and other things. We're all fascinated about all things LANL. So I think no matter what you choose to share with us, we're all going to be interested to hear what you have to say.
Shall I go first, I guess, Michelle?
Sure.
Yeah, so let me thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Chandler, for getting a chance to join with this group. It's fascinating what I learn every time I go to a public meeting, just listening to the different speakers. And I think that's very important because, strong communities to a national lab are absolutely vital. We continue to recruit people and we've got to retain people. And without good schools, without restaurants, without, the small businesses that make communities vibrant, it's really hard for us to attract people to come to our location. A short assessment on COVID. We had 13,000 people working on the Hill the 1st of March, and 2 weeks later, I had 1,400 working on the Hill. And we've implemented COVID protocols using the pandemic advisory team that I have at my service, our doctors that are very good virologists. A lot of the researchers that we do serve on this team, and they actually provide support to the federal government and the CDC through this research. So in terms of protecting the lab and the communities in which my employees live, work, and play, we had some of the best assets on the planet to do that. So over a 2-week period, we did move to a teleworking status, and then we implemented COVID protocols using the expertise. And we are now up to close to 4,900 staff that are coming on and up to the Hill every day to work. I would expect that by the end of the month, you could see that number between 6,000 and 7,000 as we roll through August, September, October. We will not throw the lab open quickly because it's not protective of the laboratory or the communities in which our employees work. But we are going to have a very deliberate ramp up over the next several months, and we've been able to put the protocols in place to protect us. We do on-site testing. We provide testing for roughly 400 employees every week. That testing, we're able to turn it around in a couple of days. We did offer the governor an option to help with backlog of testing using our assets a couple of weeks ago. And I believe the testing was picked up by the commercial industry. Of course, we don't compete with commercial. One thing that I do want to point out is COVID will eventually be over. Last year, we hired 1,200 staff, and even given the COVID pandemic, we're on track to hire almost that many or more by the end of this fiscal year, by the end of September. And so we continue to hire people, and those people need places to live. Those people need roads. Those people need mass transit. I want to thank the state government for helping us with the Department of Transportation and the Regional Transportation Authority, and Los Alamos are doing a regional transportation study so that we can use mass transit to help move people back and forth, both on the Hill and between the surrounding regions and communities. The last thing I want to say is that we continue to get and need continuing support to train the next generation of workforce. When you think of Los Alamos National Laboratory, you always think of the physicists first, but frankly, that's not the people that build, run, and operate the laboratory on a daily basis. A very sizable portion of the workforce are made up of skilled labor, accountants, computer information technologists. And we've been working with local community regional colleges, even with some of the high schools, to try to attract students into apprenticeships programs early. We've got a great relationship. I've spent lots of time brainstorming with Brian Condit these different issues that, how do we actually build the workforce of the future and inspire young students to become millwrights, welders, and pipe fitters and electricians. We will continue to grow at a modest rate for the next several years. And to support that growth, I also have substantial construction underway. We are approaching $1 billion on new construction at the lab, and we are seeking 180,000 square foot of additional office space. And for the Los Alamos community, we're very sensitive to driving up rents and, creating a competitive environment with the small businesses. And that's something that we're very sensitive to right now. And we'll certainly need to take that into careful consideration as we consider this RFP that's out. But I like Dr. Steinhaus, I could talk for hours. There's so much going on, but I'll stop there and give Michelle a chance.
I think that's boy, you talk about a good problem to have. It's, how do you spend $1 billion on construction and train a new workforce? Representative Chandler, I'm sorry that your community is, having to grapple with, how to absorb billions of dollars of new investment. That's pretty good.
Well, to be clear, Speaker, it's helping the whole state and all of northern New Mexico. And so Kelly was very modest in some of his points. I know the lab has been working with Northern New Mexico College, the local branch, Santa Fe Community College, all with the intent of training local work, local kids and so on for various programs here. So, the impact of the lab is tremendous on the state. And putting that in context with COVID, think about, oil and gas tanked, many of our, economic foundations are struggling right now. And so we're very fortunate to have Sandia and Los Alamos as something that's very stable in terms of employment and growing. So, we should all, and I know you do, Speaker, and everyone on this call do understand how important it is to maintain the strength of the lab for the entire state of New Mexico, really.
Oh, absolutely. I've got many, many constituents who are employed at the lab, and some of my closest friends are up at the lab every day. Well, not now every day, but that's where they work. And it is. It is a huge benefit to our community. It leads to great things like Pebble Labs. So Michelle Henry, lawyer extraordinaire, is general counsel at Pebble Labs. And Michelle, I think folks would like to know a little bit about what is Pebble Labs, and how is COVID treating you, and what does the future of Pebble Labs look like?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Chandler. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody. And I love to talk about Pebble Labs, so thank you for the opportunity. Pebble Labs, the way I like to explain it is, think about probiotics, and we all are familiar with probiotics in our food. And you know, when you get them into your gut, when your gut is happy, when the bacteria in your gut is happy, it affects your immune system. It boosts your immune system. And it's because of that bacteria. And what Pebble Labs does is works with bacteria to boost the immune systems of food and animals. Right now, our focus is aquaculture, shrimp in particular, because what we've learned is that we can genetically engineer the bacteria to be targeted to specific viruses that affect the food that we grow, the food that we eat. And what that does is it allows farmers to have greater certainty. It also allows less pollutants in our planet, less, for example, antibiotics being dumped into the shrimp tanks to prevent white spot syndrome and other viruses. And so it's a really exciting concept in terms of helping the planet do better to feed its people. And so one important thing I think for all of us to think about is that just as rapidly as COVID spread around the globe, like I remember back in February, it was easy to think, oh, it won't come to the United States. It wouldn't ever come to New Mexico, but it's everywhere. And just as quickly, food viruses also expand. And so you think about, you know, where do your tomatoes come from? Where does the food that you eat come from? And a lot of it is grown in other places. And so if food is affected by a virus, and so for example, there's a virus called tomato brown rugose that affects nightshades, including chili peppers. And there's been concern since November that that virus would get into the United States because there's no way to tackle it. And so that's the kind of stuff that Pebble Labs is working on. And it's super exciting for me. It's super interesting as well, because I fear that we're going to see more and more viruses circling the globe, affecting our food, also affecting us as humans. And so this state that we're in with COVID, this reliance, for example, on Zoom meetings and having to change our schools and how we go out to eat and all of the stuff that we've talked about, I fear this is not our last rodeo. And we're going to be looking at a future where we have more and more sensitivity to things like viruses. So COVID affected Pebble really in an amazing way. It's been a roller coaster, because we were on this trajectory of momentum, and we just got hit super hard at a really bad time for us, as we just a few weeks before COVID, because we're a small company in Los Alamos, but we have a real global network in terms of investors, in terms of experiments, in terms of supplies, all of that. And so we started feeling the effects of COVID by about February. We saw investments starting to dry up, opportunities drying up. Some of our development partners, a company in France, for example, just went dark when COVID hit France. And that was kind of late February, early March. And so by mid-March, when the governor declared the order on March 11th, we were already suffering bad. And so we lost people. We had to let people go. We had to cut our burn rate, our costs in half. We had to, we were fortunate, we were able to get a PPP loan. We've been working out things with our investors. We've been just gone through some incredible changes. The long story short, though, is that we are focused on two products at this point in time that are going to, one is with regard to shrimp and the white spot syndrome. The other is with regard to nightshades and this tomato brown rugose virus that I mentioned. We're in product development for both of those viruses. We are on a very, very focused track. And when COVID hit, we actually took a team, built a little team to explore whether we should go off track on those two paths and also try to do something to address COVID. It was a very, very hard decision to make because, you know, we all want to address COVID, but we realized that as a small company, especially where we were in our business cycle, a young startup, we had to stay on track. And so that's what we've done. And we are now reorganized. We have new leadership. We have worked out things with our investors so that we have a clear sight of how much money we, what sort of runway we need, what sort of runway how much money do we need before we actually get to market. And we've had to go out and figure all this stuff out. And so we are a completely different beast in a lot of ways, but we are so much stronger and poised for the future. So COVID has been a curse and a blessing for us, and we're fortunate that we're going to survive COVID. And I'm very proud of the Pebble team. One thing, if I could mention really quickly, is we do have a lot of young scientists who have kids, and it has been a struggle. It's been a huge struggle for them to do things. So thank you, schools, for everything that you've done to pivot and be able to make it happen. One thing I do want to echo Councilor Ridey on broadband, because just for example, yesterday I was on a call like this, and one of the participants, actually two of the participants who are in Los Alamos, couldn't use the video conferencing feature because their kids were in class, you know, right in the room next door, and they needed the bandwidth, they needed that online capacity to do their schoolwork. And it's surprising, actually, Los Alamos, for as sophisticated and as wonderful as it is a community, the internet's not that great. And so when it goes down, it goes down. So anything that you all can do in that regard, because as I said, I think this is not our first rodeo in terms of pandemic, and we may well see something like this again, and we'll be better prepared. Everybody will be better prepared. And with that, if I think I've talked enough. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative. It's been great to be here.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear. I mean, first of all, I mean, fascinating. I am, anytime I have an opportunity to learn about or read about the microbiome, I do so. Just seeing, you know, everything from, you know, studies where they replace the digestive tract contents of, there's one aggressive mice and docile mice, and they swap what's in the digestive tracts of each mice, and the docile mice become aggressive and vice versa. And the way our gut bacteria affect not just our health, but our mood and our thought process and the way we react to certain outside stimuli. It is, I mean, it is beyond fascinating, and I'm glad that you're there working on it. I'm also really glad you were talking a lot about shrimps, and then you threw in that nightshades and chilies were at risk, and then you kind of moved on. I was hitting the red alert button, you know, like focus on the nightshades, but then you saved us at the end there. So I'm glad you're working on that. We don't have to send the cavalry for the chili crop just yet down south. Representative Chandler, we are almost out of time, and I'm curious if you maybe have a few final thoughts before we say good afternoon to everyone.
Well, I want to thank everyone, and it was really interesting to hear about your various challenges in this economic environment, and I really appreciate all you have to say. We could talk for hours on some of these topics, and there were a few things I wanted to touch on which we're not going to get to, but next time the speaker comes through, we can talk about us being landlocked and some of the challenges of that. But thank you all. Appreciate it.
Are you going to talk about your highway scale zip line system that you want for folks to come off the hilltop? She's been trying to. She's been trying to sell.
Not talking about that.
She's been trying to sell a zip line idea to everyone as a transportation revolution. Just kidding. Just kidding. I do want to thank all of you very much for taking time out of your day to share this information with us. It is so helpful to me in my job, and I know it's helpful to Representative Chandler to hear directly from folks about what the needs are in communities all over New Mexico. And it's fascinating to hear all of the important work that you're doing, and it is very encouraging to see such talented people tackling these big challenges. It's Pebble Labs is an example, but to say that you've gone through something and you're emerging stronger than you were before, that's a great story, and there's lots of those stories all over New Mexico, and we do well when we highlight those because it gives not just inspiration but also a roadmap for other businesses and other ventures on how to navigate these very, very choppy waters and come out on the other side stronger than before. So thank you for sharing that. Thanks to all of you for sharing great ideas. I think we have a few things to work on in the upcoming legislative session. And we'll be back after the session to report on progress and continue the conversation. That's one thing that we always say with these jobs listening tours is that this is not our last visit. We will be back, and we'll continue the conversation so that we can continue to improve our work in the legislature to help Los Alamos and help the whole state be bigger and better. Also, we do something every Wednesday. We've been doing it since April. And at the end, I always close by reminding people to please, when you go out, wear your mask. That is the best thing that we can do to continue to improve our numbers, to slow the spread, to slow the rate of transmission, to make sure we don't have problems with our hospitals. The numbers over the last week have been looking very good. Case count yesterday in the 60s. Today it's 174. So we're seeing some big fluctuations. So we need to continue to be vigilant in wearing masks, washing our hands, and staying 6 feet or more away from others and not going to large gatherings. But by far the most important is please wear your mask. It is a sign of respect and care for your fellow New Mexicans, and the life that you save by doing so may be your own or maybe that of a loved one. So please don't grow complacent and continue to keep up with the masks. And so with that, I'll look forward to seeing you all here again next week at 3 o'clock on Wednesday. Till then, God bless you all, and have a good rest of your week. Nice weekend.